What is scarier than a horror movie? To me, living in an abusive relationship in real life is way worse and scarier than a horror movie. When you are living in an abusive relationship, you almost feel like you are inside of a horror movie stuck in repeat. Before my Great Awakening, when I realized I was in abusive relationships, I did not realize that I was essentially watching the same horror movie, except I was living it. I was unaware that I could walk away. I didn't know that I was repeating the same patterns. All I knew was that something did not feel good, but I kept blaming myself. Now, this episode is being released on Halloween, and though I don't really celebrate Halloween in a big way, I have been reflecting lately on this spooky season, and I do like my share of watching some horror content. And today, I want to share how, to me, real-life abuse is way scarier than anything else in the planet. And also how I have been doing so far in terms of escaping and healing the horror movie that I used to live in. Hi, I am Raysa, a survivor of narcissistic abuse, and I have complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And you are listening to Hello Trauma Brain, a podcast where I share my experiences living with complex PTSD. My hope is this podcast can help destigmatize mental health and provide support to anyone diagnosed with CPTSD who thinks they might have it or has a loved one with this diagnosis. Quick reminder, I am not a licensed psychologist or mental health care professional, and this podcast is not meant to replace nor substitute the care of psychologists, other mental or medical health care professionals. If you think you might have complex PTSD or PTSD, please reach out to your primary care or mental health care provider. Any individuals or resources mentioned in this episode are not sponsoring Hello Trauma Brain. This episode may reference abuse, trauma, and suicidal feelings or ideation, and listener discretion is advised. Remember, you can always pause or skip this episode at any time. And now, let's get back to the episode. Hello, dear survivors, and welcome to this episode of Hello Trauma Brain. Thank you for joining me today. So, quick check-in. I am officially off the medication that I was given to manage my pain, and I feel like my brain is back. Wow. So something that really struck me from this experience is how fast things got dark, and also how sensitive, I guess, my brain and my system can be to medications. So when I was communicating with my doctor and we were having this conversation about basically stopping the medication, I was under the impression that I had to titrate it away, like decrease it gradually, because that's how I got to the doses that I was in. I had to titrate myself into that. And it really shocked me when I saw her reply that the doses I was in was so low that I could just stop it cold turkey. I did not have to titrate it. I just had to stop it completely at once. And I will say the moment I stopped it, I could start to feel my brain kind of coming back to its baseline, which I know it's not 100% perfect, and you know, I still have my challenges, but the difference was night and day, honestly. And while I was adjusting to not being on the medication, there were these like dips, and it was interesting because I would experience like a lot of improvement right after I took it, and then I would dip again. And at this point, I feel like I'm more back to like my usual self. Basically, I decided to take a break last week because I was just not in the mental space to be recording and adding more work to my plate. I had to really slow things down and allow myself to recover. I will share something interesting that happened while I was going through this last weekend. So I'll start off with the good news part of the check-in. And that is that the day after, I kid you not, I was just a few hours in, stopping the medication. I wake up the next day and I woke up to something that I don't think is going to ever happen to me again. Honestly, I hope it does because it was really cool. But quite frankly, it's just one of those things that doesn't happen to me all the time. So one of my singing colleagues reached out to ask if I was interested in seeing Sarah Bareilles for free and 10 minutes away. Honestly, like, when do you wake up to a Sarah Bareilles free ticket offer and you don't even have to drive more than 10 minutes to go see this person play live? I mean, it was a dream come true, and I took her on the offer. And I was glad that my brain that day was experiencing some of the benefits of being off the medication, because honestly, if I would have been still under that medication, I might have not been able to go. But I did go, and thank you, Katie, for the ticket. I got to see Sarah, and here's where it gets even more serendipitous. And I lucked out big time because this was a VIP ticket, which means I got to see Sarah have a conversation before the concert about raising mental health awareness. And I vividly remember back when Sarah on her social media shared a post where she was basically talking about how taking anxiety medication helped her so much. And I really find it impactful when celebrities open up about their mental health, because to me, just it brings them down to our level. Like sometimes, I'll speak for myself here. I'm not gonna lie. Like when it comes to celebrities, like I sometimes maybe put them on a pedestal a little too much, and I see them as these like supernatural beings. So usually when I see a celebrity that gets vulnerable and shares about their human experience, it helps me realize that that's right. They're just another human being, just like me or anyone else, and they have the same challenges. They're going through the same things. And I remember when Sarah shared her post on how she was struggling with mental health and how medication was something that helped her a lot. And she did talk about that again this past week. And let me tell you, I have been a fan of Sarah for a while, many, many years. Actually, when I was in the a cappella group back in college, one of my solos, I picked one of Sarah's songs, Between the Lines. And I tend to really respect artists that when they perform live, they almost sound better than the actual recording. Like that to me is like the next level of musicianship and quality and craft. And Sarah exceeded all the expectations. Wow. She's such a grounded human being, very real, very vulnerable. I did not get grandiosity at all. And that is like the best compliment I can give this woman as a human being. Then if we want to talk about her musical and singing abilities, we gotta we gotta up it a notch. Incredible. Her vocal technique was impressive. As a singer myself, like sometimes I know and I can feel it when I'm not using the right technique, and sometimes I can hear it in other singers. Like I can hear what they're doing and I'm like, oh, if I was doing it just like that, that would hurt. And with Sarah, it was like I was just in awe. I was like, how her breath support, her diction, pitch, I mean, her technique is just, you can tell this woman has worked very hard and takes care of that instrument. I mean, like she should. She's gifted. I've heard other people talk about Sarah's voice like it's butter, and yes, it's pure, organic, natural, wonderful, smooth butter through and through. And something that I really liked about her was her sense of humor. She's just funny and so relatable, and it just felt like. It felt magical. It was a very intimate, smaller concert. I truly felt gifted to be there. And going to this concert and having this experience was exactly what I needed that day. And even though 24 hours later, like the next day, I kid you not, I was not in a good place at all. Now as I look back, and I'm a week far out from this whole thing. For a while I was carrying a lot of shame that things got so dark, because a part of me was like, how can you feel this way when you just experienced this yesterday? How can you be here struggling and feeling like things are not well and it's over when you just saw Sarah Bareilles for free yesterday? Like how could you? And I had that very active the next day. And I'll admit it here, I had to text the line. I had to text the hotline again. And something they did, and here's the thing, I had only texted the hotline like a few years ago when I was dark in the pit after basically when a really bad relationship I was in was ending. I ended up texting the line and it saved my life, just like it did on Sunday. And I don't remember being offered this when I texted a few years ago, but this time they offered to call me the next day to check in. And I said, yeah, that sounds good to me. Now everybody's different. Please take this with not the grain, but the whole bucket and ocean of salt. For me, when I got the call the next day, and I was in a much better place already the next day, I felt more connected with the call. I'm not gonna lie, like, I mean, even though I know they're ticking the boxes, I'm very aware that some of the questions they were asking is like, okay, they're going through a bit of a script to make sure that, I'm safe, and I appreciate that tremendously. I basically felt less of the script when I was actually on the phone with them and I could hear their live reaction to me and like that back and forth, as opposed to when you send a text and you're still waiting for the response. And I feel like that gap in between, I didn't realize it until I had the call, but that definitely didn't feel as connected. And I feel like, hopefully I never have to call again, but if I do, I will. And I'm going to call. I'm going to try calling right off the bat because I felt more supported and connected that way. And for those of you in the US, 988 is the line. And I'll link on the show notes the suicidal prevention resources. And I can say, though, that today, a week later, I feel so much better. I feel definitely more like myself. I was not feeling a lot like myself last week. And I need to be very, very careful with the medications, huh? It's wild, but it really got to me. And I'm here now. So it was a lot of really highs and really lows mixed in. And I basically part of the care that I did for myself, and I couldn't see it earlier this week, but I see it now. So I am proud of myself for how I handled reaching out for help. I did isolate quite a bit from some of the close people in my life, but I did reach out to, I'm going to call it like my emergency support lifelines, and 988 was one of them. I did reach out to both of my therapists and schedule, we'll call it like an emergency check-in. And even though by the time the check-ins rolled around, I was feeling better, I still kept them on and I still showed up. And I think that was an important thing for me to do. With asking for help is so hard for me. And asking is like a supernatural feat for me to do. But if I feel better as the help is about to arrive, I'll call it off. That's usually, I feel like my for lack of a better word, that would be like my instinctual way to handle that. And it felt a little uncomfortable to still be like, okay, I'm going to still have this call, even though I don't feel like I'm in an emergency anymore. And just because I wanted to exercise that getting help doesn't mean that I have to be in a dire crisis. I can get help at any point. And having another perspective can be helpful. And sure it was. So I wanted to share a few things that came up in therapy this week, and they kind of go hand in hand with this like spooky season theme. Halloween in the United States is on October 31st, and quite frankly, that's not really like a holiday that I observe, like I'm gonna be working that day. And quite frankly, like around here, they don't do much trick-or-treating, I've noticed. I don't know if they're gonna do it this year. But anyway, that aside, let's get to the meat and bones of the spooky episode. So this week in therapy, I was processing a lot of the reckoning that is doing the work in the RRP long-term group. And with the RRP long-term group, basically, the focus of the group is like learning how to do conflict, create intimacy, finish business with the abusive people. And right now, the encouragement is that you contact each other, and I've been doing that alongside with also contacting and like trying to create new friendships And I've been trying like the Bumble with Friends thing to do that. And I basically took a few risks and talked to some people from group, met up with someone from the Bumbles with Friends thing. And I was struck with how similar the dynamics were through and through every time. And granted, I know everybody has their own part, but I have to, sit with my part with this. And I kind of knew this deep down, but I don't think I quite felt it as much as I have lately. What I'm talking about is the fact that I tend to show up in my relationships almost like a therapist. Like I show up ready to listen and ready to support and ready to help the other person fix what's going on. And wow, that's actually not a healthy dynamic at all. It's not helpful to me. It's not helpful to the other person. And it, quite frankly, it doesn't feel good at all for my inner child. I had a bit of exhaustion come from it. And I think I might be realizing that right now. I think that's part of the reason I isolate and I don't tend to create very deep relationships with a lot of people, because I get scared that that's going to happen again and again and again. And it's easier to just step back and not get close to anyone than to get close to someone and go through the same thing over and over. Processing all this, where it came from. And I do have, of course, there's a figure in my life that used me as a therapist when I was young. And, that entailed hearing about their problems, their marital problems, their sex life. I mean, my role was to abandon myself and not have any needs so I could take care of the needs of this other person. It was hard. It was really hard. And it's really hard to still find myself taking that role, even now in my adulthood. So one of my therapists this week was using that horror movie metaphor. And the way she put it was something along the lines of, it's almost like you're in a movie theater watching the same horror movie. And it's just repeating itself. And you're just realizing that you are not living this movie, like you're not in it. You're actually just watching a movie. It's not actually happening in real life now, like in the present. Like growing up, I would say I was definitely living that horror movie and I was inside of it. And now it's more of me like, I still go to the movie theater and I still get the ticket for the same horror movie and I still sit through the thing. As an adult, in my healing and finding my own power, I am starting to learn how important it is to walk away, to get up from the seat in the movie theater and walk towards the exit and step away from it. Lately, what it feels like is that I can get up and I can walk away from the movie theater. And I think the most challenging part is that I don't know how to stop the movie from replaying. That's where I'm getting really triggered. So if you go to a movie theater or cinema, depending on what country you live in, they have different rooms, like different auditoriums where they play different movies and they have different showings. And, they can be playing the same movie at different times throughout the day. And then they have other auditoriums featuring other films and those are playing at different times. So right now, I feel like I am inside of a movie theater and I'm trying really hard not to buy the ticket to the horror movie. Like I think I'm picking a different movie. And I think I am going into a different auditorium and I sit down and then the movie starts playing and it's the same fucking horror movie. So I get up and I get out of the auditorium and I go to the next auditorium and I sit down. I'm like, okay, this there's no way this is the same movie. And yet it is. Very frustrating. I'm trying to sit with the discomfort of it and understand that, of course, I'm sitting through the same movie. This is all I've known. This is all I've learned. This is how I feel the safest. The safest for me was the horror movie where I am in the same dynamic and I have no needs and I abandon myself and I become invisible and it's all about the other person and making them feel as comfortable, safe, and heard and seen as I can. And the less they can see me, the better. And though in the past, I have found myself in situations where people do take advantage of this and they're purposely looking for someone who just listens, I have to own my thing. I have people who ask me questions and they try to get to know me and I still keep my answers short and I throw it right back at them. Working really hard at breaking that cycle. And I'll share something that I started doing because that's the whole meat and bones of this podcast. Like I don't want to just talk about the dark stuff. I also want to share with you what the new things that I'm trying and what's working and what's not. So I started taking some brave steps, which was really hard. But I will say though, until I started taking those steps, I was stuck in a really dangerous cycle. I didn't quite get kicked off from feeling so dark this week until I realized this. And it was that I needed to say something. I was definitely having an emotional flashback about a week ago. And the more things I tried, the less they were working. And because I've used those tools before and I have felt something like shift and improve, and this time I wasn't feeling that, I started panicking. And that feeling of helplessness and stuckness did not quite start lifting until I realized one thing. That I was trying to deal with the current situation I was in by not saying anything. I was too scared to have the confrontation. I was too scared to be honest. I was terrified of what was going to happen. And that approach of let's not even talk about it, it felt lethal to my inner kiddo. She was not in a good place. And it hit me that I needed to say it. And I needed to just take the risk and not worry about how the other person would feel about it. Trust that they can take care of themselves, and if they got triggered or they had feelings, it wasn't my fault, and it wasn't because I was bad. Spoiler alert. I approached people about how I was feeling with this dynamic replaying and noticing it, and that I needed to take a step back, and every single one of these people did not react in the way my inner kiddo would expect. And quite frankly, it's not coming out of nowhere. The reason it's expected is because I have seen it played out in the past. In the past, when I have reached out and expressed the thing, I have gone, anything from verbal lashings right in front of me, long dysregulated voice messages or text messages. The emails are, when it comes in an email form, forget it. That's going to be a long ass lashing of basically throwing it back at me and how I'm the one with the problem. So that was what I was expecting. And what came back was understanding, thanking me for speaking up. I was like, what? They're thanking me for sharing? Like, what? Respecting my boundaries. There was one person that the apology did not feel very, very deep. It was one of those like, I'm sorry if I made you feel that way. That did not feel very good. But even that response wasn't as terrible as some of the other things I've seen from other people in my life that are, quite frankly, not in my life anymore, and probably because of those reasons. Just sitting with the fact that this movie can play out a different way. I can walk away from the horror movie that's on repeat, and eventually in another auditorium, maybe a secret one that's in the basement somewhere, I can start to find a different film that can play in my life where it is not a horrible, lethal mistake to just speak up and say the truth about how you feel about something. Let me sit with that for a moment. The fact that I right now find myself in a period of searching for a different film, a different ending, a different twist of the plot, just something new that doesn't feel horrible anymore. It has been a really hard thing to sit with the patterns that I'm noticing in myself and how I show up in relationships. The fact that I need to work on this because I don't want to bring the same patterns into my new relationships. I'm building new things now, and I don't want to build them with the old horrific clay that's covered in just gooey, bloody, nasty stuff. I want to build something that feels good, something that I want to have in my life. I guess that's how I'm feeling so far. It's still hard to sit with what I was able to achieve this week. One of my therapists said that I deserved a standing ovation for what I was able to accomplish. And I still am not sure that I deserve a standing ovation. Part of me is starting to feel it a little bit. And I'm starting to realize that it was a big deal what I just did. It really was. Like, I went through an emotional flashback and I was able to keep myself physically safe. And I was able to reach out for help. And I was able to pinpoint what I needed and actually do it. that's the part where I think the standing ovation can come into the picture. Because I could have realized that I needed to speak up and not spoken up, but I did. And something else I started to do this week was start to talk to the people that are in my closest inner circle about these realizations I'm having and how I'm going to be working on this for the next few months. And I would appreciate if they can point it out if I'm doing it with them. I basically invited them to help me practice showing up in a different way. I reminded them that they don't have to, be a part of every single step of this process. But basically, the gist of it is I'm very aware that this healing that I'm doing right now is going to change our relationship. That's inevitable. I cannot change my relationship patterns and keep the same relationships the way they are. Like, it just comes hand in hand. And so far, they've been very welcoming and supportive, and they want to be a part of this. And some things that I was offered, one of them, a friend of mine suggested that I start our conversations for the next few weeks when we connect. Because I have this thing, like, telling you, I'm not saying them to blame 100%, but I'm very aware I set myself up in a way sometimes to be the listener. And the way I do that is, the conversation starts and I'm like, how are you doing? Tell me about you. Like, I immediately put the spotlight on the other person. It's just automatically. It's almost like autopilot. And I'm going to start practicing going first, which is really weird and daunting and very uncomfortable. I'm not going to lie. There's a reason I put the spotlight on the other person, because I don't want it on myself. I'm also realizing that people perceive me differently from knowing what I do. And I've known this, but every time it happens, it still blows my mind. And what I mean by that is I'm a podcaster. And if you see me singing, you know that I can handle the spotlight on a stage. And I appear to be very comfortable. And quite frankly, on stage I am, because it almost feels like that is the only place where it's okay to kind of be the center of attention. But even then, I don't like playing on my own. I like playing with other people, so the spotlight can kind of fluctuate on stage. Like, if I was by myself doing a solo thing, which I don't do solo acts anyway, but if I was, I don't know how I would feel about the spotlight just on me the entire time. I like interacting with other people on stage, and for that reason, because I don't want to be just the only one with spotlights on me. But in real life, something that I'm noticing strikes people is how much of a talker I am not. In many ways, I do talk, but I feel like it's becoming a bit of a common theme for people to be like, I was expecting you to talk a lot more. Like, you seem so talkative and active in other settings, and they're not pointing out something inaccurate. They're making a very astute observation, and I've had to sit with that too. It's like, damn. Who the hell am I? I think what triggers me is that I am being perceived in a way that doesn't feel authentic to me. That's really what it is. And I also need to sit with that. I'm sitting with a lot of things these days. Can you tell? Oh my gosh. And I'm trying to figure out so many things. Let me tell you, this work is not for the faint of heart. Not easy. I don't want to scare anyone away from healing. It's a good thing to heal. As hard as this is, I think if somebody was to put me back at the beginning and say, do you want to do this? I think I would still do it. I think I would. I hope I do. Yeah, I think I would, because there's no way in hell I can go back to my life being what it was. Yeah, I would still do it. It took me a minute to get there, because a part of me is like, are you sure? Are you sure about that? With how, like, do you really want another Sunday like last Sunday? Are you sure about that? That I don't want. Definitely don't want another Sunday like that one. But I do want what comes out of this work, because it's powerful. It can be life-changing, and it can be life-improving, as hard as it is to get to that life improvement. Another thing I want to reflect to before I wrap it up is how, quite frankly, and I watch my share horror content, like usually supernatural stuff. I'm not big on the gory body horror type of thing. I mean, I can tolerate it a little bit more now that I used to. I enjoy more of like the spooky, supernatural, psychological, deep type of horror that leaves you thinking about it after. And by far, CGI effects and the cinematic techniques these days are impressive. And, you know, they can create a story featuring this horrific, scary, tormenting, fictional, supernaturally entity. And quite frankly, to me, to this day, that will never scare me as much as a real life abusive relationship. And real life abuse can be scarier to me, especially if the person that's abusing you is someone you love and trust. Let's just take a movie with this fictional person that dresses up and has a mask on, and they're terrorizing and causing havoc and chaos and killing people all over town, right? Like, that's scary. It can be very scary. But I feel like I'm always a little bit more fucked up when like the twist happens and then you take off the mask of the thing and it's actually like your loved one, like your spouse or your best friend or someone that you literally have been going to for support. Oh my gosh, it just hit me. Wait. That's it. Oh my gosh, I just realized this now as I was trying to do this metaphor. Oh. That is what waking up from narcissistic abuse feels like. You have this thing with a mask that's been calling your house, been hurting people around you, they've been hurting you, but every time all you see is this dark thing with a mask on. And then the end of the movie comes and you take off the mask and it turns out that it was the entire time this person that you've been going to get help because there's this masked entity that's been terrorizing you. And this person has been like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're doing this to you, but you're so wonderful. How could somebody ever do this to you? And then it turns out that they were the ones doing that the entire time. That is abuse. Abuse is living in a horror movie. And healing from abuse is escaping from that horror movie. I didn't even know I was going to land here, but here I am. I landed. And this is the scariest thing on the planet to me. And it is why I find it very hard to trust people fully, because I'm scared that at the end of the day, they will still be behind the mask of whoever's abusing me next. Oh, man. Oh God. Oh. Man, oh, okay. Wow. I'm gonna take a moment and I'm just gonna sit with the fact that if I was not doing this podcast, I don't know if I would have ever realized that. Not on my own. Okay, so I'm having a bit of a hard time finding my ground, my words right now, because I'm just, that was a big, that was a big epiphany for me. Oof. I don't know yet how to stop the movie from playing. No clue. All I know is that I'm becoming more aware of when the movie starts playing. I am starting to give myself a bit more permission to get up and leave, even if it's just for the intermission. And I ended up somehow sitting back at the same fucking thing somehow. I am going to keep working at escaping the horror that has been in my life so far and building like the most fluffiest, wonderful childhood movie. Just soothing and I mean, think of the best feel good thing you can imagine out there in terms of a movie. Like that's where I want to end up. I want to end up in a movie where like the characters are healthy and people are supporting each other and it's a balanced reciprocal exchange and people grow and people can have conflict and it doesn't mean that everything needs to go to hell for it. That's what I want and that's what I'm looking for. Though I don't know how to get there, I want to keep trying. I'm going to keep giving it a go again and again until I finally get there and can embrace it and can sit in peace and not face that moment of despair when I realize that I somehow did not escape it yet and I'm still in the same thing. Like I want to get to the point where I can sit and look around and be like, oh my gosh, finally. Fucking hell. It took a minute, but I made it. If this is you, if you know the feeling of being in a horror movie, of watching a horror movie, of being inside of one, I wish nothing more than for you to be able to get up and leave and get out of there in whatever way leaving feels good to you. Physically leaving, mentally leaving, emotionally leaving. Yeah, that's my wish for you. I think that wraps up this escaping a horror movie reflection for today. In this week's Healing Invitation, I want to offer you a few things to reflect about. What movie is on replay in your life? In your relationships, how are things playing out? Do you feel like interactions end the same way? Are you enjoying or dreading the moment the replay begins? Take space. Walk away for a moment. Sit with how you feel on your own. I began noticing my own patterns the moment I put some distance in between interactions to actually observe my surroundings. Time and time again, I am shocked by what slowing down can do for my awareness and mental health. Please let me know how this week's Healing Invitation goes if you choose to accept it. Before we wrap up this episode, all music and production is courtesy of yours truly. Also, I want to share a few ways you can help support this podcast. You can subscribe and leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or the platform you are using to listen. Share this episode with anyone you think can benefit from this content. Follow Hello Trauma Brain on Instagram, subscribe to the Hello Trauma Brain YouTube channel, like this video, and hit the notification bell to be the first to know when I post a new episode. And you can make a donation by getting me a coffee. No worries, all links will be provided in the show notes. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you found this episode helpful. I wish you the best as you escape your own horror movie. It is time for our farewell affirmations. I invite you to repeat after me. I welcome the belief that I am enough. I am lovable. And I deserve to heal. I wish you a gentle week and thank you for your presence.